Hello, everybody. How are we doing today? Good. Anyway, I'm Dr. Rod Montag, professor at Bluefield State College, and I want to welcome everybody for attending as we kick off African American History Month. It is a very exciting time at Bluefield State College every year, and I have the honor to be introducing our guest today. A couple brief points of order before we get started, please. First of all, please silence cell phones, anything else, pagers, whatever, anything else you have. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. The other thing is this program is sponsored by the Dean of Students Office, Title III, and Emerging Leaders Institute, and also we'll be live streaming through the Beckley campus. Finally, everybody, we're going to be having a number of events throughout African American History Month here on campus. Please do attend them. They're very exciting as we celebrate this momentous time period. Okay, now, I'd like to talk about Dr. Reed a little bit. I hope he doesn't mind. But he is a professor of sociology and Africana Studies, and is also the director of the Race and Social Equity Research Center at Virginia Tech, just a little bit ways down the road. A prominent part of his academic experience has been at Virginia Tech, and he's developed and directed, I should say, 3 large social science research centers. He received his BS at Bachelor of Science in Secondary Education, Science and Mathematics. Also an MA and PhD in Sociology at Boston University. By the way, I've been there. It's a wonderful, wonderful institution. He was trained as a medical sociologist under a health services training fellowship. Professor Reed has taught numerous courses, conducted research, published numerous articles. He's also directed the project on assessment of the status of African Americans, which involved around 61 different scholars across the country. This has produced numerous books. Before his academic career, Professor Reed worked in the computer field with the U.S. Bureau of Census as a computer programmer and with IBM as a systems engineer and a marketing representative. He has served as a 3-year term as president of the National Congress of Black Faculty and is the past president of the National Association of Black Sociologists. That's wonderful. That's a very exciting organization. And I think I could go on, but I would prefer Dr. Reed to speak for himself. And it is a real honor and pleasure, sir, to have you here today. And I hope everybody will give you a very warm welcome here at Bluefield State College. Let me present first, who's going to also give you additional comments, Dr. Guy Sims, who will also give a few introductory comments, and then Dr. Reed. Thank you guys very much.
My comments are going to be very quick. One, we want to thank you all for coming out to this event today, and I want to encourage you to come out to our other events for the rest of the month. We have a speaker next Wednesday, Mr. Keith Knight. He's an artist and a social satirist. So if you could like things that are kind of left of center and challenging, and cartoons that might make you kind of squirm in your seat, this is the program for you to come see. And then on Monday, the 17th, we have Mr. Eric Webb, who's going to be talking about the future of African Americans in this country. So we hope you come on out for that. But I'm not here to take up a lot of time. I'd like to welcome Wornie Reed, a colleague of mine from Virginia Tech, to come and take the mic. Dr. Reed.
Thank you so very much, and thanks for the kind introduction and the warm welcome. When I got to campus, my phone stopped working. I don't know what that means, but I think it means that I was at a place that I hadn't been before, so I'm very pleased to be here. And also very pleased to participate with you in this first of your Black History Month events. In 1908, Carter G. Woodson from West Virginia entered Harvard University to work on a PhD. And he says he got his life's work established there. He was sitting in a class one day with Professor Edward Channing, a very prominent historian and professor at Harvard University, who said that the Negro has no history. Well, since Woodson had entered Harvard with the intent of becoming credentialed so that he could do work on the history of the Negro, as African Americans were called then, he challenged Professor Channing, saying that there are no people who don't have a history. And Professor Channing challenged him right back to go out and prove that he was wrong. So while Professor Channing got off on the wrong foot and was completely wrong about that, he did have a good response because he sparked Carter G. Woodson to devote his life, and I mean his life, almost every working moment for the next 50 years, to the idea of developing means and content of Black history. He believed and he worked to demonstrate the following, and I'll quote him. The achievements of the Negro properly set forth will crown him as a factor in early human progress and maker of modern civilizations. So usually when I give these kinds of talks, I talk about the involvement of African Americans in the actually development of this country as a country. For example, the first person to die in the Revolutionary War was a Black person, not an African American, because I would argue that he wasn't really an American at the time, because we did not have an America. And I would go on and on about things like that. But today I'm going to take a different kind of approach. I'm going to show you how everyone in here is currently benefiting from inventions and developments of African Americans. And to do that, I want you to travel in your mind with me from Bluefield to Washington, D.C. I want you to get in your car, drive to a train station. I don't know the nearest one to here, but I know there's one in Roanoke that you can board and go to D.C. So let's take that trip. So let's go to the day before you go. And the reason you're going, by the way, is you're going to visit a very ill relative in the hospital in D.C. The day before you go, you wash your clothes. And as you do that, you should thank George Sampson, who invented a different kind of clothes dryer in 1882. There are clothes dryers before Sampson, there are clothes dryers since. He is the transition from old, ineffective clothes dryers to the modern ones we have today. The next major advancement after his invention was the electric clothes dryer. And then you may have to iron a piece or two to wear or take with you. Then you should thank Sarah Boone, who invented a very useful ironing board in 1892. And what was so useful about it is before her invention, you could not iron pleated blouses that well because there was no board or mechanism to do that. She invented a mechanism so you could do that, okay? And is noted for having added this important invention to ironing boards. And in her ironing board, which was also new, is that you could fold it up and put it away. As you prepare to take your trip the next day, you're a female, you may have your hair done. If you do, you need to thank Marjorie Joyner, who in 1928 invented the permanent wave machine. She did this while working for Madam C.J. Walker. And just in an aside, Madam C.J. Walker is the person who invented all this hair products, things that became very wealthy. In fact, Madam C.J. Walker was the first woman in the United States, black or white, to be a self-made millionaire. But that's not a part of my story today. I want to have you think about Marjorie Joyner, who, before she invented her permanent wave machine, you could only do one curl at a time. She had invented a machine you could do 16 curls. This machine was oriented toward African Americans, but it began to be used in those salons by white women as well. So it became a very, very big deal. And it found popularity all over the country. And it was in heavy use until a chemical process was invented to curl hair. So you go to bed and you wake up the next morning to your clock radio playing the type of music you have it set to play. You should thank Otis Barkin for that. In 1961, he improved the electrical resistor such that we could improve and miniaturize the circuitry and all of that for not only radios, but for computers and many other household appliances. In fact, his invention was used by IBM in computers. In those days, we had those resistors replacing those tubes that had been used before. Okay, in all, Barkin invented some 28 electronic devices. After you awake to your music, you cut on the light. And for that, you should be thankful to Louis Latimer. Louis Latimer invented a more durable carbon filament that made the electric bulb more useful. It really wasn't that useful before then, so he didn't invent the electric bulb. That was Edison. However, Edison's bulb did not last very long and was impractical. Louis Latimer invented the carbon filament that held the charge to keep the light going for a long time. Okay. This invention was considered the most important innovation in electric light technology, and he transformed American homes after nightfall, because now they could have light all over the home, and not just in these places where they had these, say, kerosene lamps, is what they used before. Okay. Latimer wrote the first book on incandescent electrical lighting, and he led the development of the installation of electrical plants in the United States, in Canada, and in England. He was a big deal. But as you get up, you're thankful that you weren't awakened by the banging of trash cans with the trash pickups. There are a few people in the audience who may remember having had to do that, but the students, you don't know anything about that. And the reason you don't is because of an industrial design giant who invented the plastic garbage can. By the way, that was a big deal. He also invented the mechanism by which you put one can in the other and you could transport them. Seems simple now, did not exist before his design. This person was Charles Harrison. Charles Harrison invented the Viewmaster. How many people know what a Viewmaster is? Okay, good. He didn't invent it because he always correct people like me and say, I wasn't an inventor, I was a designer. But sometimes he would take an idea that is almost just in somebody's head and go out and design something to bring it to fruition. And that was the thing with the Viewmaster. Sears Roebuck had refused to hire him in the 1950s after he got his degrees in the field because they said we don't hire blacks. After the Viewmaster, after some pushing by civil rights people to get blacks more integrated into American society, Sears came after him. Okay, and he went to work for Sears, and for about 35 years, he moved up the ladder to become the corporate manager of design. This guy was an extremely big deal, and in every person in this room has used or is using one of his designs. Let me show you. First of all, he designed over 750 products. His designs are in most households. So I'm going to read you for the next minute or so a list of his, some of his designs. 35 millimeter camera, AM FM radios, baby cribs, back massagers, barber chairs, bicycles, binoculars, blenders, calculators, can openers, cassette recorders, circulating heaters, clothes hampers, coffee percolators, compact whirlpools, cordless shavers, dinette sets, electric scissors, electric toothbrushes, electric wall clocks, fishing equipment, fondue pots, hearing aids, hedge clippers, insoles for shoes, kitchen appliances, kitchen ranges, makeup mirrors, manicure tools, paintbrushes, phonographs, portable bars, portable hair dryers, riding lawnmowers, shoe buffers, sleds, soda fountains, sprinklers, storm doors, telephones, television sets, toasters, tractors, waffle irons, wall unit shelving, wet mops, window guards, wooden desks. Charles Harrison came to Virginia Tech about 7, 8 years ago. He's deceased now, but he came there and he was brought there by the Department of Industrial Engineering, or some name like that. Anyway, and they announced, the professors who introduced him announced that all the sewing machines that they had in that shop, almost all of them had been designed by Harrison. Most people could remember some butter dish on their kitchen table designed by Charles Harrison. And it goes on and on and on. But I need to continue on your trip. So you go to get dressed. And as you go to get dressed and you put on your dry clean clothes, you should thank Thomas Jennings. In New York City in 1821, Thomas Jennings invented the dry cleaning process. Before that, cleaning delicate fabrics did not work. They would tear up in the process. And he invented this thing and also had a tailor shop. But his invention made him very, very wealthy. So wealthy, he went and bought his wife, who was a slave. He was a free man in New York City, and so on. As you go to put on your shoes, you should thank Dan Matzliger, Massachusetts, who in 1883 invented the automatic shoe blasting machine. After his invention, and most shoes in the country were made in that area of the country at that time, but after his invention, the production at the factories increased tenfold. There was before Matzliger and there was an after Matzliger. And it obviously lowered the cost of these shoes. And he also invented some other things related to the process that he became famous for. But then you want to move on so you can leave. And so you begin to have breakfast and you drink your orange juice And as you drink your orange juice, you should give thanks to Fred Jones. In 1935, he invented the automatic refrigeration system in use today on all of these trucks and trains and so on. Think about it. That enabled them to bring the oranges and also the juice and all other things needed refrigeration from one part of the country to the other. That did not exist before his invention in 1935. Sometimes you'll have questions about what happened to these people. Every now and then I'll tell you, but I won't stop to do that. I'll run out of time. But for Frederick Jones, I'm going to tell you that he started a company called Thermo King. How many people know that name? Good, okay. Thermo King, in fact, they're all over the country now. In fact, there's a Thermo King in Roanoke, where they sell and take care of and repair these refrigeration units to use in transport of goods that need refrigeration. Okay. And this company was worth a few millions within 10 years. Then after your juice, of course, you're going to have coffee. And as you drink your coffee, you should give thanks to Norbert Rilliot, who invented the sugar refining process. I want to repeat that. He invented the sugar refining process, which in some forms or others, the same thing we use today. Before him, it was not done. They used other things to kind of sweeten, but he used this sugar refining process to revolutionize just this current household staple, sugar. All American sugar producers, all of them, switched to his process. He was invented this in New Orleans around in the 1840s. Okay? And the American sugar producers who switched right away got ahead of all other sugar manufacturers in the world because of Rilliot's invention. Then, as you prepare to leave, you make a telephone call to your friends in DC to let them know you're coming. As you make that call, and as the next time you reach in your pocket and get your cell phone, I want you to think Jesse Russell. Jesse Russell invented the cell phone. Jesse Russell, graduate of Tennessee State, and he invented the cell phone in 1988. Well, how did he do that? Before him, there were not cell phones. They were not cellular. He invented something called 2G communications. And that's as far as I'll try to go with this, so that you can ask your professors of physics or search or engineering exactly what that is. But it was the means by which you could do remote and wireless transmission of information, which we use on our phones. This was invented by Jesse Russell in 1988. He pioneered the field of digital cellular communications. Currently, he's CEO of his own company. As you get in your car to drive to the train station, please thank Gladys West. Gladys West, in the 1960s, she recently retired, but in the 1960s, she was a key figure in the development of GPS. And she was in the office where they were working on analyzing this data from the satellites that began to circle the Earth. And then she later headed the office that analyzed this data that created the GPS information that we use today. And no, you didn't know about it because even her sorority sisters didn't know about it because she didn't think it was a big deal. I think it was a big deal. And so did the sorority sisters when they found out. They flipped out. Okay? As you get in your car and drive down the streets, you notice that, well, once again, the streets in your area are clean. And you see the street sweeper disappearing from view. And as you do that, you should thank Charles Brooks, who invented the automated street sweeper. Obviously, it saved time and labor because before his invention, what did they use? Human beings with brooms. Okay. And then as you stop at your first traffic light, your first traffic signal on your way to the train station, you should thank Garrett Morgan, who in 1923 invented the automated traffic light. Let that sink in. Not just leave it there. He invented the automated traffic lights. It was cruder than what we have today, but before him, no such thing existed. Then as you go on to the station, you hear a fire truck go by. And then you say, oh, there's this other invention of Garrett Morgan that I should be thankful for. And that's the gas mask that you use when you have to go into these places with fire or smoke or so on. I could tell you stories about that, but I won't. I'll move on. And then you get to the train. And the train is busily hooking itself up to go. And then you realize that you're benefiting from the work of Andrew J. Beard. Andrew J. Beard invented the Jenny coupler. That's the thing you see when the trains go together like this and boom. Andrew Beard in Birmingham, Alabama, invented that process. Before him, out of every 10 or 15 men you saw who worked on the railroad, one of them would be one-armed because of doing that manually. And sometimes that metal thing that they did would kick back and break their arm. Andrew J. Beard was a great inventor. In fact, when I was in undergrad school, and that's a long time ago, we named our Science and Mathematics Club after Andrew J. Beard because he invented other things. He invented plows that made farming in a way easier. In fact, he got a lot of money for this. And one time he was asked by the country of Spain to invent a plow, which he did, and they paid him thousands and thousands. So obviously, he became rich. So rich that he left good money for all of his children. As the train begins to move away, I want you to thank Elijah McCoy, who invented the automatic lubrication cup, which first was used on steamboats and then trains. On steamboats and trains, they would have to stop every so often to manually oil it. After McCoy, this was done automatically. Therefore, the expression that most of you, if not all of you, have heard, and that is when someone would come up to sell this device, question asked, is this the real McCoy? Because there were a lot of imitators, okay? But they asked, is this the real McCoy? And that's where the term came from, because it revolutionized travel. And most of these inventions revolutionized something. But then I want to move to really an amazing man that you should give thanks to. Granville T. Woods. As you travel on this train, realize that everything electrical about trains he invented. Now, if that's an exaggeration, let's say 95% of everything. that is electrical about trains, he invented. In fact, he invented the third rail used on subways. Ever heard of the third rail? No? That's where the electricity comes to run the subways. He invented that. Importantly, he invented the way of communication between trains and stations and other trains. Before his inventions in the early part of the century, around 1900, 1905, and thereabout, before his inventions, there were more train wrecks because they couldn't tell each other they were coming. He made it such that they could, and on and on. Think about this. This was during the era and time of Thomas Edison, who tried to hire Granville T. Woods and turned him down. One Cincinnati newspaper said, America's greatest electrician is Granville T. Woods. So another thing about kind of this history lesson is to learn that when people did these inventions, they were recognized most of the time. It's just that some things happen that we could talk about later to make their recognition kind of disappear in the ether. Okay, but now you have been traveling and you want a snack. Your first snack is a bag of potato chips. Yes, it is true. Invented by an African American, George Crumb, Saratoga, New York. He did not patent it. He did start a restaurant that became very famous and an elite restaurant. And the potato chip business, became a $9 billion industry. So he did all right, even though he didn't get very rich. Your next snack is ice cream. So when you go to order your ice cream, the person dipping it dips this scooper in there and puts it into your cup. That was invented by Alfred Kroll in 1897, and it looked almost exactly like they look today. Because as you know, what you can do with that, as you put it over, you can just make sure all of it goes out and you can get more. Before that, you just had to use spoons and take your chances. Then you move along on the train, and you look out the window at a farm or two, and then you realize that these farmers need to give thanks to Henry Blair, who in the early 1800s invented a seed planter and a cotton planter. In fact, he was the second black person who invented something and received a patent for it in this country. But then you go on and begin to think, wait a minute. As a person, we need to think and think and think and think and think. Because he saved Southern agriculture. Now, most of you know him as doing all kinds of things with the peanut. Who am I talking about? Oh, this is not good. George Washington Carver. Invented so many things out of the peanut, it's hard. There is no complete catalog of all the things he invented. But probably more importantly, he saved Southern farming because Southern farming was kind of beginning to have a problem because every year they would plant cotton. Every year they would plant cotton. And as I understand it, when you plant the same thing over and over for decades, you kind of do damage to the soil. So he introduced the idea of crop rotation, and he introduced the kinds of crops that you should rotate with on what kind of soil. That was George Washington Carver, a person who, when I grew up, was bigger than life itself. And then you're nearing DC, and you begin to think about other health problems. And you think about the health problem of your grandmother. You think about her glaucoma. But then you're glad and give thanks to Dr. Percy Julian, who developed a way of making synthetic steroids. And he synthesized a drug that was used to treat glaucoma that pretty much revolutionized it. He did other things. He invented cortisol. You have heard of that? That was used to treat arthritis. He invented in his laboratory fire extinguishing material, okay, and many other chemical processes. He was an amazing chemist. You also, while thinking about your grandmother, hopes that she is using, that the physicians are using the latest equipment that developed by Dr. Patricia Bath to do laser cataract surgery. She invented a machine called a laser barcode that revolutionized this medical procedure. Then you get into DC and you look at what some people think is a maze, but is really a seriously organized way of setting streets up. and you say, oh, got to give credit here to Benjamin Banneker, who didn't do this whole project himself, but he was an important part of the team that surveyed and developed Washington, D.C. Benjamin Banneker is also the person who invented an almanac, which was considered more accurate than Benjamin Franklin's, because we're talking about at the same time. He also invented an almanac that he produced every year. Some people follow. But he's also the person who chided Jefferson. After the Declaration of Independence, he said, he wrote Mr. Jefferson a letter, and the reason we know he did is because Jefferson responded to him and he published it in the almanac. So we know that. So he wrote Mr. Jefferson and said, Mr. Jefferson, do you believe those words, free your slaves? See, Banneker was a free black in the late 18th century and early 19th century. Okay. And then you realize that in the hospital is a friend who is going through chemotherapy. And you think Dr. Jane C. Wright, and African American, and all of these people, of course, were African Americans. She was a pioneering oncologist. She led the development of what we know today as chemotherapy at Harlem Hospital, following her father, who was a physician there before her. And she is one of the founders of the American Society of Clinical Oncology, that is the work on cancer. Then you get to the hospital, you say, well, I better take my laptop in with me in case I have a lot of waiting to do, I can do some work. As you do that, think Mark Dean. Mark Dean was instrumental in the development of the PC. He's co-inventor of the industry standard architecture that enables the PC, and then later the laptops, to connect with printers and other external devices. He holds more than 20 US patents, and he's the holder of, IBM had 9 patents for the PC. Mark Dean holds 3 of them, 3 key ones. And most recently, he led a team that developed the 1 gigahertz microchip. And he continued to be an IBM VP. He's retired now back to his home state of Tennessee. Then they tell you as soon as you get there, you need to donate blood because your relative is needing blood. It may not use yours if it doesn't match, but you can replenish the blood bank. And then you think Dr. Charles Drew, who invented blood banking. He invented the means by which you could save this blood plasma. And that enabled substantially more people to be available in World War II to fight. He was in England when he did this, and there were many, many people who got transfusions and therefore were able to recover, and some were able to continue to fight. And so then you go in and you sit down at your computer as you're waiting to see your relative, and you realize that Professor Channing was wrong. And I hope you do too. Thank you.
Dr. Reed gave us a lot to think of, and I think one of the salient points that I think we want to take away from this is that, as you can see, individuals with their individual talents did what they did and how it impacted all of us. And we all in this room and all of us on this campus, we all have that ability to take whatever we have inside of us and whatever skills we develop, whatever talents we have, and do our thing and find that it has an impact not only just to our own individual satisfaction, but it can make an impact on our community and our neighbors and the world. So don't go too far. We want to thank you for coming out. And just a small token of our appreciation for coming to Bluefield State today and spending time with us and imparting on us some language. And so before he leaves, I always like to open up the floor. If anybody has any questions, something you heard, you have a question, whatever, he's here. I'll scan the room and see any hands fly up. Yes, sir, Jim.
Dr. Reed, I wondered if conventions and with the copyright process, and particularly considering time frame these inventions proposed, was there some level of exploitation or lack of protection of intellectual property that would come from some individual? Maybe the invention actually benefited or didn't have their benefit compromised because of the society. In other words, was there light exploitation of African American inventors and innovators during that period of time because of commercial interests?
Yeah, there were more of those in the early 1800s than later. It's amazing how many patents were granted to African Americans, say, after the Civil War up until the World War I. It's astounding. There's hundreds and hundreds of patents. So it wasn't as bad as you would think, but it existed. And sometimes you can get an indication of that because I mentioned one little thing in my talk, that Granville T. Woods, maybe I did mention this, he sued Thomas Edison twice and won both times about his patent rights and so on. So it did occur, but it didn't seem to be in this period as bad as you would think.
Any other questions? If not, then I have one, before you depart, I have one request. Please grab a juice, put it in your bag, take it to class or whatever, but please wipe out that table so that we don't have any leftovers. Let's give them one more round of applause. Thank you for coming out today.